I'm Hannah Wallace and welcome to Sustainable Finance Live, the first in a series of events hosted by Finextra Research and Responsible Risk. Kindly joining me now is Anna Poberezhna, founder of Smart4Tech and advisor from MineHub. Hello Anna, thank you very much for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So to set the scene for us, thank you. Tell us a bit about Smart4Tech and how you're helping MineHub.
So I founded Smart4 2016 and been recognized as exceptional talent with the idea how to develop the economic incentive for water efficiency and water efficient use, and incentivize industry players to be more responsible and measure their impact. And taking that, I migrated through my process of development and learning curve into the trade finance and supply chain transparency, which brought me to MineHub project over time, who combining all the different bits which I learned along the way into one comprehensive and very complex project in metals and mining commodity trading space.
All right, and we'll come on to that, a little bit more of that in a minute, but coming to the event, what's brought you here today and what have been the key takeaways now we come to the end of the event?
So, three key things which I'm attracted to. It's green finance, it's risk, and it's measuring impact and how do we translate that impact in the reporting and compliance practices which are currently not standardized. And there are different practices at the moment, and there is a lack of taxonomy between the reporting standards and initiatives and different sectors as well, and different geographies. So it's quite complex, and my goal for today was to experience how we can develop this common denominator where we can come up with the initial seed idea and scope for the next stages, how we can bring everyone into the room and develop simple language of communication between each other. So by creating and sharing data associated with transactions with the stakeholders of the particular value chain, we empower them to make better informed decisions about that particular transaction, including their lending facility. And there's where data actually, verified data and data transparency and audit trail of data, its provenance, plays a really key role within the access to finance facilities and trade finance in particular.
Sure, there's been some really interesting discussions today. So can you give us an example of better access to data in the supply chain that gives access to trade finance?
I'll give you just a bit prehistory about the trade finance. So trade finance is a fuel for business continuity and the growth. And the banks used to be the dominant players until the recent crisis in 2008, and intensification of their regulation also changed a lot as a consequence on the crisis. So the access where right now digitalisation became a new catalyst where data became the new fuel, and that's why there's so much discussion around the data. However, how do we access data and at which point of supply chain? So it is very important to consider supply chain through the perspective of value chain and to create inclusive ecosystem for each participant and stakeholder of the supply chain. So let's be specific. Assuming we're talking about the frying pan. So how do we know where it's coming from? Who participated in the supply chain? Working through reverse engineering process, we think about the sourcing, so the mine that extracts some copper or iron ore, some raw materials. Then those materials been processed, shipped, bought, sold many times. Eventually, semi-products have been produced, and then finally the frying pan appeared in my kitchen. So, and apart from the producers and manufacturers, there are also banks that are participants and then consumers. And if you can put everyone in this circle, in this ecosystem network, and incentivize to share data, and basically to create the value for data in return for exchange of something else, then there is a common denominator why everyone have to share this data, or is interested or incentivized to share this data. And trade finance comes on the other side. So and the climate change and climate risk right now comes as another incentivator. So we have carrots and sticks, and then we have compliance and regulation as well. So right now, our stakeholder group suddenly expanded, not just producer, manufacturer, and consumer, but also financiers and stakeholders like climate change. And incentive here to share the data, because simply producers or manufacturers or buyer and seller who asking for requesting working capital, they won't get that access to working capital unless they produce compliance reporting and share the necessary data about the quality, quantity of the product, about the ESG metrics and other necessary components on their due diligence side.
Sure, there's a lot to think about. It's fascinating. One thing I'd also like to hear from you is how you're working with artificial intelligence and machine learning in your organization, but also its role in sustainable finance as a whole.
Yeah, it's about sustainable finance, but it's also a long process of education of their end consumers. And today there were great examples brought about their fisheries.
Yeah.
So how to capture individual data of each ship, then associated with their different legislations, different jurisdictions, trace it down, and then connect it with the end consumers. And it's a very complex task. Sure. We don't seek their immediate answers.
And to end on then, so from your experience and what you've heard from today, do you think these challenges around assessing and understanding data to produce products and solutions in sustainable finance can be resolved?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
A positive view then.
Yeah, that's a positive view, but it's happening. We can see there new asset classes emerging. We can see new financial projects emerging. So green bonds is a very early start for that, and early example, and one of the primary examples. And there will be many more other lending and project finance solutions emerging. And in the trade finance particular space, there is a product called green letter of credit. So letter of credit is issued by lenders based on the criteria, green criteria, which have to be basically met by their borrowers. And that's another example. It takes time, of course, to meet the criteria, to set up the KPIs, to measure the impact, and understand their validity and verify that's impact against the greenwashing practices that take place in certain areas of the markets. But it's in progress.
Well, Anna, you're working on some really interesting projects, both for Smart, for Tech, and at MindHub. So I look forward to seeing how these are evolving. And thank you for your insights today.
Thank you so much for your time.